70 years ago today, on December 3rd, 1955, the residents of Montgomery, Alabama, saw a peculiar statement in their morning newspapers. The statement was drafted by a small committee of ministers, including a young preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. The statement read, and bear in mind there's dated language that we wouldn't use today, but it read, quote, "Don't ride the bus to work, to town, to school, or any place on Monday. Another Negro woman has been arrested and put in jail because she refused to give up her bus seat. If you work, take a cab, or share a ride, or walk." 2 days earlier, on December 1st, Rosa Parks was arrested. Rather than being charged with disorderly conduct, which had been the common charge levied against Black people who had remained seated on a bus, the police charged Rosa Parks with violating the city's segregation law. This specific charge, together with the community's support for her legal defense, would enable the case to eventually make its way to the Supreme Court. Now, the evening before the boycott was scheduled to begin, Dr. King could hardly sleep. He had a young baby at home who was crying most of the night, and he wrestled with the morality of the boycott method. He questioned whether it was a moral course of action if it caused economic harm to others. He also wondered whether enough people would participate because it would greatly inconvenience everyone. That first morning of the boycott, Coretta Scott King called her husband over to the window of their home that overlooked a usually busy bus stop. To their surprise, not a single person was waiting at the stop, and when a bus arrived, it was empty except for a couple of white passengers. Dr. King hopped in his car to survey other bus routes in the city, and this is what he saw, quote, "During rush hours, the sidewalks were crowded with laborers and domestic workers trudging patiently to their jobs and home again, sometimes as much as 12 miles. They knew why they walked, and the knowledge was evident in the way they carried themselves. And as I watched them, I knew that there is nothing more majestic than the determined courage of individuals willing to suffer and sacrifice for freedom and dignity." That first day was a success, but city officials and the bus company assumed it wouldn't last. Dr. King and his team also worried that participation would dwindle, and they debated whether to call the whole thing off, but they decided to forge ahead. Dr. King wrote, quote, "The first rainy day came and passed, and buses remained empty." In those early days of the boycott, Black taxi drivers offered to take people to work for 10 cents a ride, regardless of the destination, since that was the price of bus fare. Soon, however, the police began to enforce a little-known law on the books that prohibited taxi drivers from charging less than 45 cents, and the police commissioner threatened to arrest every cab driver who violated this law. In response, the organizers coordinated a volunteer carpool service, setting up specific pickup and drop-off locations throughout the city that ran continuously all day. To help pay for gas, a group of women sold baked goods to both blacks and whites, giving all profits for gas and repairs. Soon, however, the police began harassing and arresting carpool drivers for imaginary traffic violations. They threatened to revoke driver's licenses and car insurance policies. The mayor of Montgomery praised the arrests, while other politicians remained silent. Despite these efforts to take away taxis and cars from the Black community, the buses remained empty. Dr. King wrote, quote, "The act of walking, for many, had become of symbolic importance. Once a carpool driver stopped beside an elderly woman who was trudging along with obvious difficulty. 'Jump in, grandmother,' he said. 'You don't need to walk.' She waved him on. 'I'm not walking for myself. I'm walking for my children and my grandchildren.'" Now, you might assume, as I had for many years, that the demand of the boycott was to end bus segregation in Montgomery. That was not the case. The organizers had 3 demands, which Dr. King presented in a meeting to the mayor, city officials, and the attorney for the bus company. These 3 demands were: 1, a guarantee of courteous treatment by bus drivers. 2, passengers to be seated on a first-come, served basis, with blacks seating from the back to the front and whites seating from the front to the back. And 3, employment of black bus operators on predominantly black routes. The mayor and city officials roundly rejected all 3 of these demands. Dr. King reflected on that meeting. He wrote, quote, "I had gone to the meeting with a great illusion. I had believed that the privileged would give up their privileges on request. I came to see that no one gives up privilege without strong resistance. Even when we asked for justice within the segregation laws, the powers that be were not willing to grant it." As the boycott continued, Dr. King's house was bombed. He was arrested and jailed for allegedly driving 30 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Then city officials dug up an old state law that said boycotts were illegal in Alabama. So one day, more than 100 people, including Dr. King, were charged with conspiracy for organizing an illegal carpool system. On the day of that trial against Dr. King and others, literally in the middle of the trial, a reporter entered the courtroom and passed a note to Dr. King. The note stated that the Supreme Court had just affirmed that Alabama's state and local laws requiring segregation on buses was unconstitutional. Rosa Parks' case had made its way through appeals to the Supreme Court, and despite that ruling, on that same day, Dr. King and his fellow organizers were found guilty of an illegal carpool in violation of Alabama's anti-boycott law. Dr. King wrote, quote, "On that day, 2 historic decisions were rendered. One to do away with the carpool, the other to remove the underlying conditions that made it necessary." The organizers announced the end of the bus boycott shortly thereafter on December 21st, 1956. It had gone on for 382 days. The black community in Montgomery succeeded in overcoming bus segregation through a combination of organized activism and legal challenges, both working in parallel, all despite the active resistance of politicians, law enforcement, and the majority of their white neighbors. Reflecting on the boycott, Dr. King wrote, quote, "I came to see that what we were really doing was withdrawing our cooperation from an evil system, rather than merely withdrawing our support from the bus company. I conceived of our movement as an act of massive non-cooperation." Right now, in America today, we are bearing witness to massive cooperation from judges, Congress, the military, law enforcement, and a majority of Americans who are cooperating with an evil system that's working to cleanse our country of those deemed undesirable through immoral and illegal actions. In the judicial branch, when the Supreme Court declares that a person's skin color, accent, and profession is probable cause for harassment, violence, and detainment, that is massive cooperation. When immigration judges, who are part of the executive branch, refuse to hold bond hearings so that ICE can detain and deport as many people as possible, that is massive cooperation with an evil system. In Congress, massive cooperation is passing a spending bill that gives $45 billion for new immigration centers, $30 billion for enforcement and deportation operations, $46 billion for additional border wall construction, and $10 billion for a DHS slush fund, totaling more than $131 billion, all while the town of Burlington and other towns across our country don't have enough money to repair and build schools. And I think we all know what massive cooperation looks like among our Massachusetts delegation in Congress. They cooperate by abiding by a rule that ICE invented in June instead of adhering to the actual law that gives every member of Congress the right to make unannounced inspections to, quote, any facility operated by or for the Department of Homeland Security used to detain or otherwise house aliens, as in Burlington. Now, it's true. Many of our elected officials are working to help a handful of individual immigrants whose names happen to cross their desks. That is true. That is important. But without taking any steps to fight the system that has abducted more than 4,000 of our neighbors whose names will never cross their desks, they're cooperating with an evil system and failing our communities. And when it comes to the military, we've seen what massive cooperation with ICE looks like. It's allowing DHS and ICE to set up planning bases, detention warehouses, and deportation flights on military bases. Our brave soldiers are better than this, aren't they? Yes! We see what massive cooperation looks like for local police across our country. It's performing crowd control for abductions, never asking federal agents for identification or judicial warrants, never checking on the well-being of community members being abducted, and not lifting a finger to protect immigrants' constitutional rights while they are being violated right in front of their eyes. So when I think about the act of massive non-cooperation that was announced 70 years ago today in Montgomery, Alabama, I am reminded that it is and has always been up to us to bring justice into this world. It's up to us to not cooperate with an evil system. So what does non-cooperation with ICE look like? Non-cooperation is reading the damn Constitution. Non-cooperation is standing in plain sight to express love and support for our immigrant neighbors and to express shame at the criminal actions of our government. Non-cooperation is speaking the truth. Non-cooperation is recording ICE even when our government claims that recording is assault. Non-cooperation is marching for justice. Non-cooperation is giving our money to support organizations that help clothe and feed our neighbors and to organizations that defend them to the end in court. As the residents of Montgomery taught us 70 years ago today, whether it's walking, standing, sitting, cooking, delivering food, these ordinary and commonplace behaviors become profound when done in the pursuit of life, liberty, and justice. Each week, while bearing witness, we tap into these timeless traditions of nonviolent resistance because it's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do, and it's the strategic thing to do. Nonviolent resistance has a depth, a reach, and a power far greater than any fist, greater than any weapon, greater than any insult. And so we're here, week after week, in the sweltering heat, in the freezing cold, to match our government's visible violence and cruelty with our equally visible nonviolence and compassion. Dr. King wrote, quote, "Non-cooperation with evil is just as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. Let's not give our government and its allies 1 ounce of our cooperation. Let's not let them change us. Let's not let our pride or ego or fear get in the way of massively cooperating with all who support immigrants and nonviolence. Let's grow this loving solidarity." Thank you. Yes.